The boy who listened too closely. The sun rose slow over the city of Chennai. A soft orange light spilled across cracked rooftops and busy lanes where dogs barked, milkmen pedaled, and the smell of tea and diesel danced in the air. In one of the narrow lanes behind a small house with green shutters and uneven tiles, a boy sat on the edge of his bed listening. He wasn't listening for a voice or a song or a sound that others might notice. He was listening for something deeper, something quiet. His name was Sundar. His mother called his name once, then again. Breakfast was ready. Sundar didn't answer right away. He wasn't ignoring her. He had simply heard something else. A train whistle. It was far away, maybe 10 kilometers out, but Sundar, even at 12 years old, could tell the model of the train by the pitch of its horn. His father worked on the railways. Sundar would wait every evening to hear the sound of his father's train, so he could run to the gate before anyone else. This small habit, this small attention, made Sundar different. School was not easy for him. He was quiet, not shy, but too observant. In a classroom full of noise, he heard the ticking of the ceiling fan. When the teacher explained science or maths, Sundar didn't just write notes. He stared at the teacher's hands, wondering why they moved the way they did. He noticed patterns others missed. And when he answered, the class often laughed. Not because he was wrong, but because he said things that were too detailed, too deep for a boy his age. One day in 8th standard, a new boy joined the class. His name was Ramesh. He was taller than the rest and had just transferred from a private school. He wore polished shoes and his English was smooth. The teachers liked him immediately. So did most of the class, but Sundar saw something different. Ramesh's eyes never looked straight at people. He blinked too often, especially when he was praised. One afternoon, the teacher gave them a group project. Sundar and Ramesh were put together. The topic was simple: make a working model of a switchboard. Sundar had already made one the year before, but he didn't mention it. Instead, he asked Ramesh what he thought. Ramesh shrugged, said he didn't know. You figure it out, he said, looking at the wall, but Sundar didn't feel insulted. He saw something in that shrug. He saw fear, not laziness. That night, Sundar stayed up past midnight, building a perfect working model with wires from a broken radio. The next day, he carried it in a box wrapped in newspaper. Before class began, he handed the box to Ramesh and said, "You explain it today. I'll help if you need." Ramesh looked shocked. His face went red, but he nodded. During the presentation, Ramesh's voice shook at first, but then grew steady. When he finished, the teacher clapped softly and said, "Good work, both of you." After class, Ramesh pulled Sundar aside. He didn't say thank you, not right away. Instead, he said something Sundar never forgot. "Why did you let me take the credit?" Sundar replied. "Because I didn't do it for credit. I did it to understand the switch." Ramesh stared at him, speechless. That moment, small and silent, began a strange friendship. They never became best friends, not the kind who play cricket together every evening or share secrets. But they respected each other. Ramesh began to change. He stopped talking over others. Sundar began to speak a little more, not loudly, but with more confidence. Years passed. Sundar got a scholarship to study metallurgical engineering in Kharagpur. It was the first time he left Tamil Nadu. The train ride was long, cold, and lonely. He carried one bag, one notebook, and one photo. His parents standing outside their house smiling. Kharagpur was noisy and rough. The North Indian boys made fun of his accent. They called him Chennai boy and laughed at his lunch. Sundar didn't fight back, not with words. He watched, learned, and slowly became better than all of them. Not out of pride, but out of a deep, silent love for knowledge. One evening during a seminar, a professor asked a question about materials under pressure. No one answered. Sundar raised his hand and gave a detailed explanation using an example of how train brakes worked. The room went silent. The professor nodded and said, "You've just described the basics of what we call memory alloys." Impressive. After class, a recruiter from a foreign company approached him. He said, "You think differently. We need people like you." But Sundar turned the offer down. He wanted to study more. After graduating top of his class, he was offered a scholarship to study in America. Sundar had never been on a plane. His mother packed his bag with pickles, dried chapatis, and a small envelope. Inside was a folded rupee note and a piece of paper. On it was a single line in Tamil. Never forget the sound of home. America was cold. Too cold. The streets were wide, the food was strange, and the silence was louder than anything he'd known. He missed the noise of Chennai, the train horns, the street hawkers, even the heat, but he studied harder than ever. He lived in a small dorm room with 2 other students, both loud, both from New York. They didn't understand him. Sometimes, they mocked his English, though he spoke it perfectly. But Sundar didn't mind. He just kept listening and watching. One night, while working in the lab, he discovered a bug in a browser he was testing. It was a small error, but it could crash the whole system under certain pressure. He fixed it and wrote a report. 2 weeks later, a senior professor called him to his office and said, "You have a gift. You notice what others don't." That gift would take Sundar to Silicon Valley. He began working for a small tech company. Long nights, endless screens. Nobody knew him. Nobody cared about his story. They only cared about results. But that was enough for him. Until one rainy morning, something strange happened. His phone buzzed. An unknown number. The voice on the other end was calm, professional, and direct. "Hello, Mr. Pichai. This is Google. We've been reading your work." He froze. The voice continued. "We have a project you might be right for. Come to Mountain View. We'll send the ticket." When he hung up, Sundar sat still for a long time. Then he looked at his old notebook, the same one he had carried on the train from Chennai to Kharagpur. On the first page was a line he had written years ago. "Listen so deeply that the world forgets to shout." He packed his bag. He boarded the flight, and when the plane lifted into the sky, he closed his eyes. Not to sleep, but to listen, to the engine, to the wind, to the strange, soft sound of the future calling. The air in California felt thin, almost too clean. Sundar stepped off the plane with tired legs and a heavier heart than he expected. He had imagined this moment for years, landing in America not as a student but as someone being invited. Someone noticed, someone needed. But the welcome didn't feel grand. It felt strange. He walked slowly through the terminal, eyes wide, but quiet. The cold glass walls and silent conveyor belts reminded him of his first walk through Kharagpur. Unfamiliar, unfriendly, but full of hidden patterns. And then he saw it. A man stood near the exit holding a white placard, but instead of Sundar's name, the card read, "We know what you saw." Sundar stopped. Not out of fear, but confusion. His mind searched through memories. He had reported bugs, yes. He had studied strange behaviors in systems. But nothing secret, nothing illegal. He walked toward the man, unsure. The man wore a black jacket and glasses, clean cut, not smiling. Sundar cleared his throat and said, "I'm Sundar Pichai." The man nodded. "We know. This way, please." No further explanation. They walked in silence to a black car parked outside. Sundar placed his single bag in the trunk. The man opened the back door. As the car started moving, Sundar finally asked, "What is this about?" The man turned slightly. "You fixed a bug in a browser, correct?" Sundar nodded. "That bug could have exposed millions of users." "I didn't know that," Sundar said. "But you found it before anyone else. You closed a door before the thieves even knew it was open. That kind of vision is rare." Sundar looked out the window. Trees passed by like shadows. "I wasn't trying to protect anything, I was just curious." The man finally smiled. "Exactly." They drove for another 20 minutes. No music, no small talk. Just the soft hum of the engine and the weight of something bigger than Sundar had ever imagined. They reached a large office complex with glass buildings and quiet fountains. Google campus. As they entered the main building, the man handed Sundar a visitor pass. "Someone wants to meet you alone." The elevator ride was smooth. Too smooth. Sundar stared at the floor numbers, blinking slowly. At the top floor, a tall woman in a blue sweater was waiting. "Mr. Pichai," she said, shaking his hand. "I'm Marissa. Follow me, please." They walked into a large meeting room. Empty chairs, long table, whiteboards covered with diagrams. She pointed to a seat. "You're not here for a job," she said. Sundar's eyes narrowed slightly. "I was told, you're here for a challenge. Something we can't figure out. Yet." She pulled out a small device from her pocket and placed it on the table. "This," she said, "is a prototype. Something we're building. It could change how people use the internet. Faster, smarter, more intuitive. But it's failing. We don't know why." Sundar picked it up carefully. It was sleek, smooth, warm to the touch. He looked at the ports, the light sensors, the design. "You want me to fix it?" he asked. "No," she said. "We want you to understand it. To see it the way you saw. That bug. Not with tools, with instinct." Sundar felt something stir inside him, a kind of quiet excitement. Not pride, not ambition, something deeper. The feeling of a puzzle that wanted to be solved. For the next 8 hours, he sat in that room, testing, listening, observing. No interruptions, no distractions. He asked for one thing: silence. They gave it to him. By midnight, he stood up and said, "It's not a hardware issue. It's the way. The interface responds to user patterns. It learns too fast. It overwhelms itself. You need to slow the feedback loop." Marissa blinked. "How do you know that?" Sundar smiled softly. "I listened." They didn't give him an answer that night. No job offer, no applause, just a nod and a thank you. But the next morning he woke up in a company apartment. A letter was slipped under the door. "We would like you to join us, not as an employee, as a thinker." Years passed faster now. Sundar became part of teams. Teams became departments. Departments became projects. He never raised his voice, never rushed. He didn't fight for positions. Yet he kept rising. Not because he wanted power, but because people trusted his clarity. He didn't chase attention. But attention followed him. One day, in a board meeting, an executive shouted at a young engineer for a failed demo. Sundar leaned forward gently and said, "He tried something new. That's worth more than a perfect repeat." The room fell silent. The executive blinked. The young engineer looked at Sundar like he'd seen a star fall. From that day, Sundar's words began to carry more weight. Not loud, not many, but honest. Calm. And one day, something happened that changed everything. A company-wide meeting was called. The CEO stood in front of hundreds of employees. "We're starting a new project," he said. "It will become the default browser for billions of users. It must be fast, safe, beautiful, and it will be led by someone who listens before he speaks." Then he turned to Sundar. "It's yours." Sundar stood still. He didn't nod. He didn't smile. He simply said, "I'll build something people can trust." And he did. The browser launched. The world noticed. But Sundar remained quiet. He walked the same. He ate alone some days. And one evening, after a long day, he stood in front of a screen watching the live stats of users across the globe. He saw Chennai light up, a tiny dot on the map, his home. He closed his eyes, and just then, the anthem played. Not loudly, not over speakers, not from a stage, but from a memory. In his mind, he heard it the way it used to play every Monday at school, when he stood still beside Ramesh, eyes closed, listening not to music, but to meaning. And far away, in India at an event in Delhi, the anthem played again, and a man stood on the stage, Prime Minister Modi. And just as the anthem began, he looked at the screen and paused, because on the other end of the world, the camera had captured a man standing still in an office, eyes closed, hand over heart, alone. It was Sundar, and that pause was not scripted. It was not for the audience. It was not for politics. It was for something deeper, a recognition of silence, a salute to someone who rose without noise. The message came at 3:12 a.m. Sundar woke not because of an alarm, but because something felt wrong, like a sound too soft to hear, but strong enough to pull him from sleep. His phone buzzed once. No ringtone. No contact name. Just a plain notification from an internal alert system. Subject: integrity breach. Status: hidden user activity. Text: you built Chrome. Now someone's trying to break it from inside. He sat up in bed, staring at the screen. The room was dark. The clock on the wall ticked louder than usual. He read the message again. No attachments, no links, no sign of where it came from. Yet something about it felt real. Sundar didn't panic. He didn't call anyone. Instead, he walked to his desk, turned on his laptop, and began to search. Not in the usual places. Not in open files or visible dashboards. He went deeper. Chrome was more than just code. It was trust. Millions of people opened it every day to learn, to connect, to dream. And Sundar knew every corner of it. Not because he memorized the system, but because he had helped shape it, piece by piece. Silently, he traced user activity patterns, focusing on access logs from the last 7 days. One string caught his eye. An internal address pinged the server at 2:44 a.m., but the signature was wrong. The user ID had administrator status, but Sundar knew every admin by name. This one didn't belong. He cross-checked login points. Someone had accessed the system using a mirrored key, a fake fingerprint. But the access had come from inside the campus, someone close, someone trusted. For a brief moment, Sundar sat back in his chair and closed his eyes. He wasn't angry. He wasn't scared. He was something else. Disappointed. Not because someone had tried to break what he built, but because someone had done it quietly. Like a whisper. Like a lie. He opened a secured line and messaged only one person. Maria, the head of internal security. She was sharp, methodical, and spoke even less than Sundar. At this hour, she was probably asleep. But her reply came within minutes. On it. Sundar didn't need to say more. For the next 3 days, they worked, in silence. No one in the office noticed. Sundar attended meetings as usual. He smiled. He reviewed code. He gave feedback, but every night after the lights dimmed and the halls went quiet, he and Maria scanned deeper into the systems. They found something strange. Someone had created a mirror environment. Not outside the firewall, but deep within it. Hidden under a shell called sandbox test. The label was harmless, but the activity wasn't. The mirror was learning user habits, storing password hashes, and testing weak points in third-party plugins, a shadow version of Chrome, and worse, it had been running for months. Whoever did this, Maria said one night, is brilliant. Sundar nodded. And close. They knew where to hide. She looked at him carefully. Do you think this is revenge or money? Sundar didn't answer right away. He stared at the screen where lines of data scrolled like rain. Then he whispered, it's about control. Not money, not fame. Someone wants to see if they can hold the wheel. They set a trap. They let the mirror keep running, but inserted a silent tracker into the script. Something undetectable. Something that would follow the code back to its source. They waited 2 more days. Nothing. Then at 1:09 a.m. the script called home, and the trail led to a name. Derek, a senior developer on Sundar's own team, someone who had been with him since the early days, someone who had once brought Sundar coffee before his first public launch, someone who had once said, we follow you because you don't tell us what to do. You show us how to listen. Sundar stared at the log. The access was clear. The code matched Derek's style. Precise, clean and fast. It was him. But why? Maria suggested security action. Suspension. Legal notice. Press control. Sundar said no. Not yet. He wanted to talk. Face to face. The next morning he walked into the lab where Derek was debugging a new feature for Chrome updates. Sundar stood beside him without a word. Derek looked up, surprised. Hey, something wrong? Sundar didn't reply. Instead, he placed a single printed page on the desk. It showed Derek's access signature. For a moment, Derek said, "Nothing." His fingers froze over the keyboard. Then he leaned back slowly, eyes fixed on the page. His voice when it came was tired. "I didn't want to hurt Chrome," he said. Sundar waited. Derek continued. "I wanted to see if I could build something faster, more adaptive. I wasn't going to release it, just test it." "Without telling anyone?" Sundar asked softly. "You don't get it," Derek said, his voice sharp now. "You've become too careful, too safe. Chrome moves slow. You've made it like you. Quiet, cautious, always waiting." Sundar nodded slowly. He didn't defend himself, he didn't argue. He just asked, "Do you think silence means weakness?" Derek looked confused. Sundar continued, "You think I move slow because I'm scared. I don't. I move slow because trust is heavier than speed. People don't open Chrome because it's the fastest. They open it because they feel safe." Derek looked down, ashamed, but not yet broken. Sundar said, "You're brilliant. But brilliance without patience becomes arrogance. You built a shadow, but you forgot the light." Maria stood outside, waiting. She had orders ready, but Sundar walked past her and said, "No punishment." She raised an eyebrow. He added, "Make him fix what he broke. No shortcuts." The company never heard about the breach. The mirror was erased. Derek worked under supervision, and over time he changed. He became quieter. Not silent like Sundar, but steadier. More thoughtful, and Chrome survived. Stronger. Sundar returned to his rhythm. Calm mornings. Long nights. Listening to systems. To silence. To people. But the world had begun to shift. News spread that Google was growing fast. Too fast. Questions rose in the media. Should one company have this much reach? A government inquiry was announced, and during a panel interview in Washington, Sundar was asked, "Do you control the internet?" He looked at the room. Reporters, lawmakers, flashing cameras. Then he said softly, "No, I don't control it. I serve it." The answer went viral, but Sundar didn't watch the clip. Instead, that night he video called his parents in Chennai. His mother smiled. His father asked about the trains in California. And then, in the background, Sundar heard something faint. A school nearby was playing the national anthem. He closed his eyes and just listened. Not to the music. To the weight behind it. The weight of where he came from. And just as he opened his eyes, a second message came. This one was different. Encrypted. No subject. No signature. Just 5 words. It wasn't Derek. Look again. The message sat on the screen like a shadow with no shape. Sundar read it again. It wasn't Derek. Look again. No sender, no server trace. Just words, delivered through a blind node that bypassed Google's own firewall. Only someone who knew the architecture intimately could have sent it. Only someone close. Sundar didn't respond. Not because he didn't believe it, but because deep inside, he already knew. Something about Derek's guilt had felt incomplete. Too direct, too convenient. Sundar had trusted the data, but now he had to trust something more dangerous, his own instinct. That night, while the office lay silent under a silver moon, Sundar reopened the logs. He replayed every detail of Derek's activity. His access time, his code signature, his keyboard rhythm. Yes, even typing left patterns, like a fingerprint. And suddenly something clicked. The code that exposed Derek wasn't his usual style. It mimicked his structure, yes, but not his touch. Derek coded in clean, wide spaces. The mirrored environment had tighter syntax, like someone trying to hide inside efficiency. Someone wanted Sundar to find Derek. Someone wanted it to end quickly. He walked to Maria's office where she was reviewing international server syncs. "Pull up access layer logs again," Sundar said. "I want to see who reviewed Derek's profile before the breach." Maria looked confused. "You think someone led us to him?" "Not think," Sundar said quietly. "I know." They dove deep into security reviews, internal audits, and the weeks leading up to the first mirror activity. Only 5 engineers had the access needed to audit Derek's logs. 4 were accounted for. 3 were overseas. 1 was on leave. The 5th? Liam, the youngest member of the core Chrome team. Brilliant, intense, ambitious. He had joined after Chrome became a global success. He often spoke fast in meetings, throwing out ideas like sparks from firewood. Sundar had watched him closely, admired his energy, but also noticed something underneath. Impatience, and now, suspicion. Maria tapped. A few keys bypassing a privacy lock. He ran a manual check on Derek's access code 2 days before the mirror was discovered. That's not part of his job. Sundar nodded. He planted the trace, Maria said. He wanted Derek to fall. We confront him, she added. Sundar shook his head. No, Maria frowned. Why? Because I want to hear his reason, not force his confession. They waited. The next morning, Sundar asked Liam to join him in the courtyard. The sun had just risen. The air was quiet except for the soft hum of sprinklers in the distance, the kind of silence Sundar liked. Liam sat down nervously. Is something wrong? Sundar handed him a folded page. No words, just the trace log with Liam's signature highlighted in red. Liam didn't speak for a long time. His jaw tightened. His eyes darted between the page and Sundar's face. Finally he spoke. I thought you'd be angry. I'm not. Sundar said. Then why did you ask me here? Because I want to know why you did it, Sundar said. Not from fear, not from defense, from truth. Liam's shoulders sank. He looked older now, smaller. I thought if Derek fell I could step in, he said. I had ideas. Big ones. Faster rendering, predictive loading. But no one was listening. You always listen to Derek. I listen to everyone, Sundar said gently. Liam looked ashamed. I wasn't trying to destroy Chrome, I just wanted to matter. Sundar sat back. He understood that feeling. He had felt it too once, sitting in a dorm room in Kharagpur, thousands of miles from home, wondering if anyone would ever hear his voice. You made a mistake, Sundar said. But you're not lost. Not yet, Liam blinked. You're not firing me? No, Sundar said. I'm giving you something harder. What? You'll rebuild the patch you broke, not alone, with Derek. And when it's done, you'll present it to the whole team, with your name next to his. Liam stared at him, speechless. And if you ever try to rise by pulling someone else down, again, Sundar said, his voice steady, you won't just lose your job. You'll lose yourself. Liam nodded slowly. I understand. That night, Sundar stood at the window of his office, watching the lights flicker across the city. It would have been easy to cover it up, to say nothing, to protect the image. But Sundar didn't care about image. He cared about roots, about people. The next week he flew to India, not for a summit, not for a press tour, just to walk the old streets of Chennai again. He visited his school, the same building with cracked paint and wooden desks. He found the spot where he used to stand during morning assembly, eyes closed, listening to the anthem. The principal recognized him and asked if he would speak to the students. He declined. Just let me sit with them, Sundar said. So he did, in the back row with the students in worn shoes and faded uniforms. The bell rang. The anthem played, and Sundar closed his eyes. But something happened that day, something he didn't expect. When the anthem ended, the students clapped. Not because they knew who he was, not because someone told them to, but because they felt something. And when Sundar opened his eyes, he saw one boy looking back at him, eyes full of questions, eyes that saw beyond the suit and the stories, eyes that listened. And Sundar smiled. He knew that boy, not by name, but by soul. That night, as he prepared to return to California, Maria called him. "We have a new threat," she said. "Not from inside, from out there." "What kind?" Sundar asked. "Deepfake phishing," she said. "Someone's trying to impersonate you." "Me?" "Yes," she said. "Voice, face, tone. The systems flagged it. It's almost perfect." Sundar sat down. "Almost?" he asked. "There's one thing the fake can't do," she said. "What's that?" Pause. "The fake version talks fast, moves fast. But you listen. And that silence, it's not in the copy." Sundar smiled faintly, and then Maria added, "But people won't know the difference, not unless we teach them." Sundar looked out the plane window, deep in thought. The next battle wasn't about code, it was about truth. The video spread faster than any update Sundar had ever pushed. Within 4 hours, it had reached 200 million views. At first, it looked like a regular keynote. Sundar standing in front of a sleek digital backdrop, his voice calm, his face thoughtful. He was speaking about user data and free access, but then around the 30-second mark, everything shifted. "Data belongs to us," the fake Sundar said. "And if users don't agree to new terms, they should not use our products." It was delivered with the same rhythm, same gentle pauses, but the meaning was wrong. The real Sundar would never say that. It wasn't just a different sentence, it was a different soul. Inside the Google office, alarms had already been triggered. Engineers scrambled to confirm the source. The fake had been created using advanced AI, deep voice cloning, face mapping, posture simulation. The real video it was based on had been recorded a year ago during a quiet internal meeting. Someone had taken it, sliced it, twisted it, and now millions believed it was real. News outlets picked it up. Journalists demanded answers. Government officials began drafting inquiries. Social media exploded with outrage. Sundar sat in his office, watching the screen in silence. He wasn't angry. Not yet. He was listening. Listening to the spaces between the words, to the difference in tone, to the heartbeat behind the sentences. And it wasn't his. It had no weight, no breath, just sound. Maria entered the room with a tablet in her hand. "We confirmed it. The server originated in Southeast Asia, bounced through 6 proxies." "Who did it?" Sundar asked quietly. "We're still tracing. But that's not the real danger," she said. "What is?" Sundar asked. "People don't care that it's fake," she said. "They've already decided it's you." That line sat heavy in the room. He had spent years building trust, without needing to speak loudly. Now one fake sentence threatened to erase everything. The board called an emergency meeting. Investors panicked, partners worried. A few even called for Sundar to step down temporarily. But Sundar didn't speak. Not yet. He walked out of the meeting, stood alone in the courtyard, and let the evening wind pass over him. He thought of Chennai, of his school, of standing for the anthem with his eyes closed. He thought of his mother's quiet hands packing lunch with care. He thought of his father's long walks home from the station, always with the same slow step. He had never spoken to lead. He had listened. But now the world needed sound. The next morning, Sundar entered a studio, not the company's. A small private room with no lights, no screens, no background music. Just a plain chair, a single camera, and a live connection. The team waited behind the glass. No scripts, no advisors, no edits. Sundar sat down. He looked into the lens, and for the first time in a long time he spoke. Not to explain, not to convince, but to be known. "Hello," he began. His voice was slow. Every word chosen like a stone placed gently on a riverbed. "You saw a video. It looks like me. It sounds like me. But it is not me." He paused. "Not for effect. For truth. I've spent most of my life in silence. Not because I was afraid, but because I believe listening is more powerful than speaking. But today I must speak." He leaned forward. "Technology is changing. It can now create faces, voices, emotions. It can make you believe. But belief is not proof, and sound is not. Soul. He looked down, then back into the camera. I came from a small town. I used to wait by the gate to hear my father's train. I used to fix radios just to understand how they spoke without mouths. And now, the world is hearing a voice that isn't mine. So let me say this clearly. Another pause. I do not believe that users must surrender privacy to use technology. I never have. I never will. He stood up slowly. If you believe in truth, look beyond the noise. Listen not with your ears, but with your heart, because real voices don't just speak, they live. He walked out of the room. The team behind the glass didn't speak. They didn't need to. That evening, the real video was uploaded, no cuts, no effects, no music, and it reached more people than the fake ever did, not because it was loud, but because it was real. Comments flooded in, from strangers, from old friends, from Ramesh. Yes, Ramesh, from school. He had seen the video. He messaged Sundar just one word, still listening, and Sundar replied, always, but the story wasn't over. Maria called again. Her voice was different this time. Steady, but urgent. We found the source, she said. It wasn't a rival, it wasn't a hacker. Then who? Sundar asked. It was an insider, she said. Someone you knew, someone who believed. You had forgotten where you came from. Sundar didn't speak, because deep inside he already knew. It began with a name, one that Sundar hadn't heard in many years. A name that brought back dust-covered classrooms, the smell of chalk, the warmth of filtered sunlight falling through narrow school windows. Maria had spoken it softly, almost like a question. Arun Narayanan, she said. He's the one who created the deepfake. Sundar stood still, not because he didn't remember the name, but because he did. Arun had been his science teacher, the first person to ever call him gifted, the one who had once said, "You don't need to be loud to be strong." The man who had taught him to build circuits from scraps, to find answers not in books, but in curiosity. The man who used to wait until after school to show Sundar old devices and ask him, "What do you hear in this?" For Sundar, Arun was more than a teacher. He was the first compass, and now he was the storm. Maria handed Sundar a file. Inside were logs, message trails, timestamps, all confirming the truth. Arun had built a small lab in a remote village near Madurai. Using old servers and open-source AI, he had generated the fake video. He had timed the release. And he had watched, but he never tried to hide. In fact, he left a message for Sundar, handwritten, scanned, sent through a secure portal. It said, "You listened to the world, but you forgot to listen home." Sundar closed the file and said nothing. That night he didn't go home. He didn't eat. He walked through the quiet streets near the campus, thinking not like a CEO, not like a global leader, but like a student. The next morning, he booked a flight to India. No press, no team, just him, alone. He landed in Madurai as the sun dipped behind the hills. The air was thick with heat and silence. A car waited for him, arranged by someone who still remembered his name. They drove through winding roads, past rice fields and faded temples, until they reached a small village. There, in a modest house with clay walls and a tiled roof, Aaron sat on the porch. Older, thinner. But his eyes, those sharp, searching eyes, were still the same. When Sundar stepped out of the car, Aaron didn't move. He just said, "You came." Sundar nodded. "I had to." They sat without words for a while. The sounds of crickets filled the space between them. Finally, Aaron spoke. "You used to fix radios just to hear silence between stations. Do you remember that?" "Yes," Sundar said. "So why did you forget that silence?" Aaron asked. "Why did you let the world make you its noise?" Sundar looked down. "I didn't forget," he said. "I just didn't know how to carry both." "Both?" "Progress and peace," Sundar said. "Growth and roots." Arun sighed. "When you left, we were proud. You became a symbol, a boy from here, now standing there. But over time, we stopped seeing you. We saw only the company, the product, the empire. I didn't build an empire, Sundar said. No? Aaron asked. Then why does it feel like we need permission to breathe inside it? The question hit deep, not because it was harsh, but because it was fair. I never meant to take anything away, Sundar said quietly, only to build something useful. You did, Aaron said, but you also became too careful, too quiet. People began speaking for you. And now they don't know the difference between your voice and a lie. Sundar looked at the sky. Stars beginning to shine through thin clouds. Why the fake? He asked. Arun's voice softened. To shake you, not to ruin you, to remind you that a voice unused can be stolen. Sundar didn't reply. Instead, he reached into his bag and pulled out a device. A simple recorder. He placed it on the table between them and pressed record. Then he said, "Teach me again." Aaron looked surprised. You want me to? Yes, Sundar said. Tell me what you see, what you fear, what I forgot. Not as a lesson, as a conversation. And so they spoke. For hours. Not as leader and critic, but as student and teacher. They talked about technology in villages, about children who had access to phones but not to food, about artificial intelligence without human conscience, about silence, and listening. When the sun rose, Sundar stood up. He held the recorder gently and said, "This won't be edited, won't be branded. I'll share it just as it is." Aaron nodded. Good. Before Sundar left, Aaron said, "Do you know the last time you closed your eyes during the anthem?" Sundar smiled. "Every time," he said. "Then keep doing it," Aaron said, "no matter how loud the world gets." The recording, titled "Listening Again," was uploaded 2 days later. No graphics, no music, just 2 voices, real, raw, human. Millions listened. Some questioned it, some cried, but all understood. This wasn't a speech, this was a return. The fake video faded. The trust began to heal. And Sundar? He kept building, but slower now. Not in speed, in thought, in intention. He returned to his teams not with new instructions but with a new example. He began asking questions again, not for answers, for connection. And 1 year later, during an event in India, Sundar was invited on stage by the Prime Minister. As the national anthem played, Sundar stood, still, eyes closed, listening. And just then, Modi ji paused mid-step, watching him. Not as a CEO, not as a symbol, but as a man who remembered. The moment was caught on camera, shared across the world. But Sundar never watched the clip, because the memory lived inside him. Quietly. Forever.